Hi everyone, welcome back to another episode of Unraveling Rare. I'm Eleni from Unravel Biosciences, and today we're continuing the SPATA saga by inviting Mariah George, who is the founder of the SPATA Foundation. Now, Mariah, Jacqueline gave you a really good introduction in our previous episode, but I would like for you to introduce yourself and talk about, your role in the company, in the foundation, and all that.
Yeah, so my name's Mariah. I am the president and also founder of the SPATA Foundation. But more importantly, I'm a mom. My son is Luca, he's 2, and he has SPATA5L1, which is one of the rare genetic conditions we represent. And he was the reason that I launched the SPATA Foundation and the reason that I'm doing everything that I'm doing.
What are the necessary steps in order to start a foundation, especially for like an ultra rare disease?
Yeah, so I'm definitely not an expert. I've kind of been learning as I've been going, but when we got Luca's diagnosis, I knew that I couldn't just sit around and wait for research to happen. I knew that I was going to have to push for it to happen, and so I started connecting with some of the researchers that were credited on the research papers, and I started connecting with some other rare disease organizations, and I think that that was really helpful for me to reach out and kind of see what other rare disease organizations have done and how they started. And so they encouraged me to start my own patient advocacy group. And, from there, I started kind of playing around with names and everything and decided, okay, we'll do the SPATA Foundation so that it's both SPATA5 and SPATA5L1 since they are two different genes. And from there, we filed for 501c3, which is nonprofit status, and we got an employee identification number. We have tax exempt status, and that's kind of how the official process works. You have to get those statuses in order to get tax exempt donations. But then from there, having an official name, a logo, a website, an official email address has been really helpful when contacting other organizations or researchers. It just seems a little more professional than a personal email address reaching
Mhm.
out to them. And I'm able to say, hey, we have this group. We've already connected with other families. And so that's kind of how the process has been for me. I'm still learning as we go. But I think the biggest thing has just been building relationships with other organizations who have already been through this. That way they can kind of help guide me.
Hmm. And especially because your foundation is really young, right? I think it's only been like
Yes.
what?
Yeah, we got 501c3 status in November of 2023. So
Mhm.
got Luca's diagnosis in February of 2023, and I immediately started working. We got 501c3 status in November, and then over the past 6 months, I've just been working nonstop, trying to make connections and work with other groups and businesses like Unravel, and just pretty much grasping at anything that I can.
Yeah, so I mean, because it's such a new foundation, right? And I mean, I'm sure even research and treatments must be kind of still developing. I was just wondering if you could tell me a little bit about the therapeutic landscape or any research that's been going on for SPATA disorders.
Yeah, so when Luca was diagnosed, I started, trying to find every research paper that I could, and unfortunately, there wasn't much out there. But as I started reaching out to some of the researchers, there were a handful who are still actively studying both SPATA5 and SPATA5L1. There isn't really much known about them. The function isn't understood, and in all honesty, there's really just not a ton of information known about them. But that's kind of what we're working towards. So we've been building relationships with these researchers who are interested in these genes and who have maybe done past research on them. And we're in the process of building a medical and scientific advisory board to help guide us on a path towards these different therapeutic and options and everything. And so right now with Unravel, we're exploring the drug repurposing project, because we know that the drug repurposing would be a treatment option if we find something, but it would be a much more attainable option for right now, shorter term, much more attainable in terms of money and cost. And the reality is that some of these children don't have 5 to 10 years to wait for something like gene therapy, and they need something to start lessening symptoms now. And so I kind of, had, a plan of like a short term plan for some kind of viable treatment option like drug repurposing. But in terms of a further out therapeutic treatment, obviously there's things like gene therapy, mRNA therapy, ASOs. And the answer to that is we really don't know which one's going to be something that we can do just because we don't know a lot yet. And so that's why, it's crucial to kind of build the foundation, with your building blocks first. We've got to have researchers, we've got to have a board, we've got to have the tools like animal models and stuff that we need to figure out what kind of long-term therapy is going to be best for our children.
And especially when you're talking about long term, I was really wondering, what are your maybe therapeutic aspirations, whether it would be for the next year or for the next 5 years or maybe even longer than that? How do you kind of see, treatment options for SPATA disorders?
I would hope in the next 5 years that we could get a more permanent therapy option like gene therapy or enzyme replacement therapy, or something that is, going to be a long-term treatment, that isn't like a medication that, our kids have to take every day. And so over the next year, I hope to, through Unravel, find maybe a drug that can help lessen some of the symptoms that our children are experiencing, um, and put them in a better, in better health while we look for other therapeutic options. And so short term drug repurposing, long term hopefully maybe gene therapy if that's what's gonna be best for our kids. And in the far future, maybe like 10 years, I'm hoping that maybe it's something that can be treated, if a child is born with it, maybe they can be treated right there at the beginning, of their life, and then, their symptoms are non-existent. That would be the hope.
We talked a lot about clinical manifestations and, symptoms and the way they're presented with Jacqueline in the previous episode. I'd be really curious to see your answer about a question that I also asked her, which is, if you could alleviate one symptom, you had a magic wand and you can just make one symptom disappear, what would that symptom be?
Um, I think just, I guess, like the global developmental, and movement disorder in general. So our children, pretty much 99% of them have hearing loss, which honestly I could care less about. Hearing loss is not a big deal. A majority have epilepsy, which is a big component for everybody. Thankfully, Luca's are pretty mild, knock on wood. And so for us, it's just, he wants to move so bad, but his brain just can't really communicate that with his body. And so for him, I think that it would be lovely to be able to see him sit up and walk and play with toys and, be able to move his body in the ways that he wants to. And so if I could alleviate one symptom, that would be it. It's just helping him function in his body better.
hmm I really hope that, drug repurposing or at least finding a drug candidate that might alleviate some of those symptoms is actually going to be a really good way to achieve that.
Yeah, hopefully.
Those were all the questions I had prepared for our episode. I would just like to maybe have you say any closing thoughts or any messages that you'd like to extend to any families or any listeners who would be interested in maybe learning more about your foundation and the work and the mission that you guys do as a team. So feel free to extend.
Yeah, I would just say that, if your child has a rare disease, we're all kind of one big rare disease family. And so I'm open to talking to anybody who needs to talk, whether you're a parent or you're, somebody trying to start a rare disease organization. I can't say I'll have all the answers, but I'm more than happy to talk with anybody who is interested in learning more about SPATA5 and SPATA5L1, learning more about starting a patient organization, or even learning more about Unravel, because, working with Unravel so far has been really great. And we're very, very hopeful, that we'll be able to find a potential treatment option for, short term. And so I think one thing is just that it's okay to have hope, because there is a lot of science and people out there that, is attainable. And there's a lot of science that exist to create treatments and cures, and there are people who want to help. Sometimes it just takes some determination to get to them. So.
Hmm. And what's the best way that somebody could maybe contact your foundation or maybe learn more about SPATA disorders and, your foundation in general?
Yeah, so we have a website. It's www.spatafoundation.org. So that's SPATA foundation.org. And there's quite a bit of information on there. And you can contact us via email on the website. The email is just info at spatafoundation.org. And that email address comes directly to me.
Okay, that's amazing. I'm sure that this episode is going to be very interesting for all the listeners. And especially, like you said, because rare disease is such a big community, right? I feel like everyone kind of knows everyone.
Yes, after Luca was diagnosed, before having a kid with a rare disease, I didn't think much about rare diseases. Like I didn't know much about them. And then after Luca was diagnosed, I'm like, wow, there's a lot out there. Like there's a huge community with needs that have been unmet. There's a
Mhm.
huge rare disease community, and so it's good knowing that we're not alone.
Mm-hmm, definitely, because again, like there's as many disorders as there are genes, right? So,
Yes, yes, there's a lot. There's a lot.
well, thank you so much. It was such a pleasure having you on the series, and I know that in the future we are gonna invite you again so we can kind of have like a little tadpole episode, and you can actually see the tadpole. So it's gonna be really nice to see the saga continue.